Welcome to On the Way Classroom with Tony Crisp. Each weekday, Monday through Friday, Dr. Crisp will teach the Bible from its historical, geographical, linguistic, and cultural context. Tune in daily to start your day right and to deepen your understanding of how to better walk the way and enjoy the journey. Now, here's your host, Dr. Tony Crisp.
Welcome to On the Way. I'm Tony Crisp, and in the next two sessions, we are going to finish up the Gospel of Luke, and then next week we will begin with the Gospel of John, and you are not going to want to miss that. The Gospel of John is so unlike the other synoptic Gospels. So much John gives us, so much the emphasis on the deity, the fact that Jesus is God, is stressed in the Gospel of John like no other. But before we get to that, I want to finish up these next two sessions with the Gospel of Luke. We've been in Luke 24 all this week, and so we're going to stay in it both today and tomorrow because of the richness of these passages. When we left off in our last session, the disciples who had been on the road to Emmaus to their home had met Jesus, and they had recognized him as they ate together, and he blessed the bread and broke it just like they had seen him do over and over and over again. The disciples that Jesus had met with, Jesus left them immediately as soon as they recognized him, and they made their way very quickly back to Jerusalem to tell the disciples that the women weren't crazy, Peter wasn't crazy, John wasn't crazy, that indeed Jesus is alive and he had appeared unto them. And so when we left off our last session, that's where we were. So we're going to pick up in verse 36, and so it begins, "Now as they said these things," they are the disciples who had been on the road to Emmaus, just as I spoke. "And Jesus himself stood in the midst of them and said unto them, Peace be to you, shalom. But they were terrified and frightened and supposed that they had seen a spirit." You see, they still couldn't believe that there they were with the doors shut, the windows shut, everything all locked up tight, and Jesus appeared unto them. That means in this glorified body that he had, that he could walk through solid material. He is supernatural, and so he is not limited to the space-time continuum that they were walking in. And so it says, but they were terrified and frightened and supposed that they had seen a spirit. They just couldn't believe that he was real and in his body. And he said unto them, Why are you troubled? Why are you so perplexed about all of this? Why are you agitated about all of this? This is what I told you over and over and over again. Yes, Jesus said, I told you so. And they just still could not believe that it was him. And so he says, why are these doubts arising in your hearts? He said, I want you to look at my hands. I want you to stare at my feet. And that it is I, myself. He's using all of these personal pronouns. These first person, he's saying, look, it is I, myself. It's me. They were just astonished. And so they, again, thought he was a spirit. Now, a spirit is not able to do what Jesus is about to show them, that he has a real body. And this is very important that we understand that Jesus has a real body. It's glorified. But just like Jesus had a real body after his resurrection, you and I are going to have real bodies after our resurrection. Now notice Jesus could withhold his identity from someone, or he could reveal himself as who he is. And so here he says, behold, look at, stare at my hands. I want you to see my feet, that it is I myself. Touch me, handle me, and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see I have. In other words, Jesus said, I have a real body. This is the same body I had, but it's different now. It's glorified. It is a heavenly body. not a terrestrial body as Paul talked about in 1 Corinthians 15. Now, if you're having problems with understanding this, I would encourage you to mark beside this very verse, verse 39, 1 Corinthians 15. 1 Corinthians 15 is the longest chapter, the most detailed chapter in the entire Bible on the resurrection of the body. You see, resurrection only has to do with the body. It's the word anastasio. We say Anastasia. That's right, it's the Greek name for a lady that is still a very popular name today, Anastasia, because it means resurrection. Anastasia, it means to stand again. Tasso is the word, which means to stand. It comes from tithemi. And then you have ana, which means again. And what is physical resurrection? Physical resurrection is when the body stands again. There's no such thing in the Bible as soul resurrection or spirit resurrection. When it talks about resurrection, it always talks of the body. Now, we're going to look at this in detail when we get to John chapter 11, and we will relate it to 1 Corinthians 15 and back to this passage in the Gospel of Luke. Because in John chapter 11, Jesus deals with the body of Lazarus, and he uses physical terms, and he talks about how Lazarus will stand again. So Anastasia, the word for resurrection here, is the word for standing again. So he had a bodily resurrection. And here he says in verse 39, handle me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see I have. Now, I have been asked over and over again in my 50 years of ministry, did Jesus have a real body? I mean, did he have flesh and bones? He said he did. He said, I want you to touch me, handle me, feel of me, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see, as you are witnessing that I have. Jesus' body, resurrected, glorified, had flesh and bones. It's a real body. It's a recognizable body. They recognized Jesus when he wanted to be recognized. When he did not want to have people recognized, then he was unrecognizable. But it was the same Jesus that had died that rose again from the dead. And when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. But while they still did not believe for joy and marvel, he said unto them, do you have any food here? Now, isn't that an amazing phrase? They did not believe, they doubted because of joy. You see, some things are so bad you just can't believe it. You cannot believe that something so bad could happen. And that brings about a certain surprise and a certain disbelief. But that's not the case here. They couldn't believe it for joy. How could this be? You mean, Jesus, you are the same Jesus that we saw crucified, and we saw how Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus put you in that tomb? Lord, we saw that. We saw how they put nails in your hands and your feet. We saw how they pierced your side with a sword. You mean this is the same body? And so they still couldn't believe, but it was not because they couldn't believe out of disbelief because it was so bad, but because it was so good. They were just, and you've heard people say that when something good happens, I can't believe that. I can't believe this is happening. Well, they're not saying that they don't believe it's real. It's just that, how can it be? It's too good. And this is what they were dealing with. It says, but while they still did not believe for joy, and they marveled, they were astonished, they were astonished, he said to them, do you have any food here? It wasn't because he was hungry, but he wanted to show them that he could still eat. So they gave him a piece of broiled fish and some honeycomb, and he took it and ate it in their presence. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on what I believe about the resurrected and glorified body at this time. But let me assure you, when we get to heaven, we're going to have our bodies on there. They're going to be glorified, but they're going to be the bodies that we have right now, but they're going to be totally different. They're not going to be susceptible to the limitations that we have right now. They are going to be recognizable, but totally different. That's the way Jesus' body was. And I believe this is one of the explanations for why the Lord teaches in His Word that when we get to heaven, we're going to know one another even as we are known. I remember when a dear professor of mine, his name is John Pretlove, he was from England, and he came to the Criswell College to teach. He was studying at the time at Southwestern Seminary, and he was doing his PhD, and he was finishing it up, and he was teaching in the bachelor's program there at Criswell. It was then called the Criswell Bible Institute, CBI. Then it became the Criswell Center for Biblical Studies, and then it became known as it is today, the Criswell College. John Pretlove was a wonderful man. He spoke with a distinct British accent, and we got to know him very well. And we started Eastern Oklahoma campus of the Criswell College, and the professors that came from Criswell to teach in that campus that we began in Oklahoma would stay at our home. We had a parsonage, and we had a room that was in the back. It was kind of like a prophet's quarters, and my study was back there, and we had a bedroom and a separate bath. Oh, it was great. It was way out in the country. So many came. Ken Matthews, that many of you know from Beeson now, and that did the New American Commentary on Leviticus. He came there. Leo Edelman was my mentor, and he came on more than one occasion. As a matter of fact, he finished the last book that he wrote, a commentary on Philippians called By Life or By Death, I believe. But when John Pretlove came, I was so amazed that when we were having a meal together, and Karen would so diligently and faithfully fix a good country meal, just like many of you are aware of, she's a good country cook. And so the three of us sat down at our table, and we held hands, the three of us, in that parsonage. And when I prayed, I said, and Lord, thank you so much for Dr. Pretlove being with us. And I went through a ritual of prayer. And when I said amen, with his hand still in mine, he said, "Oh, Tony." And he began to speak in that distinctively crisp British accent. And he said to me, "I'm not Dr. Pretlove. When we're in your home, I am John. The Lord knows me as John, Tony. Don't ever forget that. The Lord knows you as Tony. He knows me as John." And it was remarkable to me because it's just like a light went on, and the Lord knows me as my name. He knows John as his name. He knows you by name. When we get to heaven, we're going to be known just as we are known. You're going to know me in heaven as Tony, because that's who I am. That's my God-given name. That's what my parents named me. And so Jesus was known to them. And he was known by the way he broke bread, the way he ate. He had flesh and bones. He ate fish. They knew when he did that, that indeed he was the same Jesus that they had seen die, and that they had heard speaking on the cross to his Father in heaven, that they knew that he was put into a tomb, sealed with a Roman seal, and 3 days later he came out alive again, and he was the same Jesus that they had walked with, only now he was alive from the dead and alive forevermore. Don't miss this last session that we'll have tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to On the Way Classroom with Dr. Tony Crisp. Tune in each weekday for more information on how to read, study, and understand the Bible. If you have questions, please write to questions@tonycrisp.org. That's questions@tonycrisp.org. questions@tonycrisp.org. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day on the way.